But I am just so pleased, so very, very pleased that Tim Pinnick has agreed to be our presenter this evening. His topic, the voice of the people, African Americans in the early 20th century. Tim is just amazing. He's actually been here at the Allen County Public Library pre-COVID and has done some just dynamite presentations. He is so knowledgeable. For more than 3 decades, he has really been a key figure in African American genealogical education, in general genealogical education. If you listen to any of Tim's presentations, you can't help but get excited and be hungry to try out the tips that he provides. He's an expert genealogist, he's a writer, he's a speaker, he's an instructor. He teaches a whole suite of courses at a genealogical institute, both during COVID and pre-COVID, and certainly moving on into the future. It's hard not to get excited listening to Tim. It's really an honor to consider Tim a friend. So without further ado, Tim, I will turn the program over to you.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Kurt. I appreciate that introduction. We looking good?
Looking great.
Okay. Well, before I start, I really would like to thank Kurt and his staff. One of the many downsides of COVID is not being able to get there and see them and visit with them and utilize their absolutely amazing library collection. That's something that I've dearly missed. And I've cursed COVID over and over because of that particular thing in particular, because it is such a great resource. And some of the things I'll be talking about today, if not all of them, will probably be residing in Allen County's library. Some of the things we'll be talking about today. But I am very pleased to be here with you guys this evening. I see that Oberlin's in the house. I saw somebody shouting that out, my girl from there. So it's a pleasure. It really is. And I thank everybody within the sound of my voice that found the time and carved out the time and felt it was important enough to tune in and join me as I share some information with you. So that's greatly appreciated. All the hard work that I put in makes it worth it. And trust me, it was a lot of work going into this presentation. I was sharing with Kurt that Kurt and Allison, that I've probably got nearly 80 slides here. And so, but that's me, right? You guys that know me know I'm always coming packing with more than I probably should have. But this is going to be a different presentation from what you've seen in many cases from me, because there's going to be a lot of visuals. I mean, a lot of talking, show and tell type things as I take you through several of these journals and publications. So it'll be a little bit different, not as many bullet points and teaching. That teaching or the information that you need to get started researching this material is going to be in your handout. And so let's go ahead and get started on the voice of the people, African Americans in the early 20th century. Although this presentation will not go beyond the 5 journals that we'll be discussing, you can learn about them and many others in this book, okay, offering historical and descriptive profiles of over 100 African American periodicals. It should be on your bookshelf if you're really a serious researcher. So the question today really is what was the African American community like in the early 20th century? And I know all of us have different experiences with that, from what we found out, maybe pictures that you have, of various hodgepodge of things. But a concentrated focus question is, what was it like in the early 20th century? Things like, how did they dress? How did they play? What did they do for entertainment, for recreation? What did they read? What we know, right, is if it's we had so many of our ancestors that couldn't read or were illiterate for a time, but that literacy rate was really going up after emancipation, and a lot of them, that was important for them, so they learned how to read. And what's really neat and what I love about researching my family and other people is you learn all these really amazing things. Like, if they couldn't read, then they had somebody to read to them. They often gathered together to have a newspaper or something like that read to them and stuff. So they were absorbing whatever was in print, whatever was out there for them to devour. They were doing that. And so they were reading. And what did they think? That's another thing. You surely didn't get that answered in the white newspapers or the journals or whatever they were publishing. They didn't really care what their African American neighbors thought. And then what was the makeup of their community? I am such a community person. I mean, I love studying the community. Robin Smith, Deborah Abbott, and others are so masterful and good at describing and talking about the importance of building community and building out the community, knowing who your neighbors are, knowing who those other community members are, who's fellowshipping, worshiping with you, and that type of thing. So we really want to always strive to figure out what that community makeup is. And especially in those early days, like say in the early part of the 20th century when Jim Crow was raging. And so we're gonna try to address that with some resources. Let's start out with a vision of the people. Now, for me, my vision came in the form of a book. This book here. I believe I first came across it at Powell's bookstore in Chicago's Hyde Park area. You Chicagoans, my people, you guys know the place I'm talking about. And some of you others that may have come through Chicago on your way to try to check out Obama or something might have seen the place too, but it was a huge bookstore. And I was building my book business and I was going in there and buying books and stuff. And I'm pretty sure that's when I first came across the book, and it was beautiful. The cover, I had to pick it up. It had Du Bois's name on it. And it was as advertised. I mean, when I opened that thing up, it was riveting. And what it represented, and I didn't know that at the time, was this was Du Bois, or this was a piece of what Du Bois had done. He had been asked and accepted the opportunity to go to the Paris Exposition in 1900, and there he put on an exhibition of all of these beautiful photographs, hundreds and hundreds of photographs of African Americans. And what he was showing the world was what the world usually didn't see when they looked into America and into mainstream media. They saw a different vision of African Americans. Through Du Bois's pictures that he bought, they saw a wonderful collage of people that were thriving, intelligent, had culture, and everything that they were not seeing. And so it was quite a success. And so when Du Bois comes back, of course, the exhibition's over, everything's kind of forgotten about, and essentially, the pictures just kind of fade away. And they faded away pretty much until the Library of Congress. The Library of Congress had those photographs, and someone discovered them, and that was the impetus for the book that we're talking about. And so what we're looking at now is a screenshot of a C-SPAN presentation where they did a book talk and they discussed the book, the people that were responsible for getting it into print. And so that's who you see here, several of the people responsible for that. Down in the lower right-hand corner, you see Margaret A Battle, and she was the person that was working in the archives, and somebody had found these photographs and thought they were outstanding and had brought them to her attention. And then when she saw them instantly, she knew that there was something special. And so then she started going up the chain, telling people about these photographs. And so one thing led to another. And of course, these photographs were so amazing that they decided that they had to publish them. And so they took and they published roughly about 150 photographs. And they had two distinguished individuals, experts in their own right, come together and write essays to fill out this book. And so David Leering Lewis and Deborah Willis, Deborah being an expert in photos, put together an essay that accompanied the work. And so I don't know how many of you in the audience have ever seen this book, but it's absolutely amazing. And so you should try to get it, if not, interlibrary loan or something like that, because the pictures are spectacular. And so since I don't really want you to wait that long, what we're going to do right now is we're actually going to take a journey. We're going to start taking a look at some of these pictures. So I did some screen captures of the C-SPAN event. And so you can kind of see some of the things that the world saw that Du Bois brought to them back in 1900 to show them the culture and essence of the African American community. And so again, here's a picture. We'll just scroll right through about 12 or 15 of these. And you can see how beautiful they were. And they just covered, not only just people, but businesses and all manner of life in the African American community. A lot of these people were from the Atlanta area. And there was one particular photographer that had a predominant number of the pictures were his, and they were also of some of his family members. And so you can see they're just striking images. And again, this was the image that the world was not seeing. And this really, frankly, was the image that a lot of America was ignoring and not wanting to acknowledge. This lady right here was actually, she's a nurse. She's studying for nursing school. So she's a candidate for nurse. I just love these pictures when they're just sitting and just lounging, kind of carefree. I really, these are pictures that didn't survive in my family. And so whenever I see these, it makes me long for the ones that I know we probably had taken at some point and never got a chance to see. I did get a chance to see a few. My brother found some about 4 or 5 years ago, and that was really nice. But the majority of them just never survived. But I mean, these pictures are just outstanding. Look at those guys. They're about to get into mischief. And this is a picture here this was taken, they said after in front of a church. I think they might have said AME church, but it was after a funeral of somebody. And then they went outside and assembled for this particular photograph. And I really like this one because you look at this. You got this young lady that's with this team of horses there, and I think that picture is striking. I love it. I think that's probably my favorite. So now what we're going to do, we're going to explore 5 publications that enabled African Americans to both see with images and to learn about themselves in these publications. The first one is one that I absolutely love. It's called the Negro Yearbook. I've never did any kind of presentations or talk much about it. I did in my toolbox class that I had down at IGHR. I touched on it because I thought it was such a valuable tool and asset for African Americans. But when I did my journal and magazine presentation, it was something that ended up on the cutting room floor. I didn't get a chance to share it because I had so much material and I couldn't put everything in there. But this book was a vision of Tuskegee Institute. Those are the guys that put it together. And this particular gentleman, Monroe Work, he was the director of the Department of Records and Research there when it was founded. And he was the initial person to put together as the editor the Negro Yearbook. And this is actually a personal picture of mine on a trip down to Tuskegee. I knew how massively important he was to the African American story. And so I had to go over to the cemetery area and get a picture of this. So we're going to look at several examples of different things. There's so much stuff. I'm just touching, it's just barely, skimming the surface really of the stuff that's available in these different publications. I kept, trying to, I wanted to put this in, then that, what's more important than something else. But really the bottom line for you is to get your hands on these books and see for yourself what's in there, because there's an amazing array of stuff. And you just need to go ahead and trust me and go ahead and get these books into your hands and see how marvelous they are. So this first one it deals with a central issue in the country. And of course, that's the race problem. And so it was important enough to where when they put these annuals together, they have somebody put together, go out and kind of survey and see what is the race issue, what's the race problem, and how is it being dealt with in the United States, this year, because this was an annual publication. And so they will go out and basically, take the temperature of America. And they did it very, very deliberately and precisely. And so what you're going to see here now is this is four of a number of different reports from different parts of the country. And these are the ones that were from the West Coast. And so you can see they went up and down the West Coast as far as the major cities, and they were wanting to find out and report on what it was like for the African American in those particular communities. And of course, you got to keep an eye on the Klan. Okay, you got to keep an eye on the Klan. And so in this particular instance, what we saw, or what they put in the book, was, again, they surveyed the country and they got all these different reports or gathered all this information on Klan activities in all the various states. I don't think they covered the 50 states in the annuals, but they covered a pretty good number of states. And so here I chose Pennsylvania for a reason, because of what's here. And I'm going to read through this one because, again, when I saw it, I said, I got to put it in, I got to read it. And so here, Pennsylvania, Klan activities in several communities of Pennsylvania have led to a statewide investigation. Orders from the state police headquarters were issued in September 1946 to the commanders of 4 police squadrons in the Commonwealth to make a thorough check of the respective areas of Klan activities. Howard F. Schaefer, Cyclops of the Franklin County Klan, declared that the Klan is a victim of prejudice. Our organization has existed for 25 years and is 100% American. We are here to stay, and there is no law to stop us. And so I read that, I just get back in my seat, I just couldn't stop laughing. These people, I mean, they were something. They were something. And so for him to just go out there and just be so indignant and say that, it was just mind blowing. I said, I got to share this with my people. And so here's something, I didn't even know this group. Again, I say, when you go through these annual yearbooks, I guarantee you're going to learn so much stuff you didn't know, contemporary things about African Americans. And so this was one that, again, I put in here because I'd never heard of them, and probably a lot of you hadn't either. And so it was a Klan-like group. It was a group that was designated and identified, like a Klan group because of the things they did. And so this one was operating in the Atlanta area. And so they were starting to cause a ruckus and get on people's radar. And so they reported on them and let people know that to be on the lookout for these particular gentlemen in this operation. And so now we're going to look at some nuggets. It's like I say, I'm just going through and some of the things I found and said, okay, I got to put this one in. And so this one got in, and some of you know, when you look at this, you're like, okay, newspapers, Tim and newspapers, right? Synonymous. And so, yeah, this again was an education for me. I say I've written a book on Black newspapers. I'm fairly well versed in it, but you're always can learn some new things. And so what struck me with this particular one is when you get down about 4 or 5 lines in, it's talking about the Afro-American. And so when it talks about the African American, it talks about its National Weekly Baltimore edition. So, right, these big Black newspapers had these national editions. And then we know that they might have had a local edition too. But here I was just really, I was taken aback to see that the Afro-American had local editions in Baltimore, which I expected, Washington, which I had found at one point when I solved a mystery for somebody, Philadelphia, which I did not know, Newark, didn't know, and Richmond, I did not know. And so that was really interesting news for me, and it'll be something I'll be sharing probably in future newspaper talks now that I've got this additional information. Unfortunately, most of the local editions probably, again, they probably didn't survive. And if you're talking about the Afro-American and you see it on ProQuest, of course, it's going to be whatever one that they got, which is probably the national one. It might be the Baltimore one, but it's probably the national one, but it won't be any of these others. I think that the DC Public Library might have editions of the Washington one. I'm not sure about that, but that's really something we need to do as a group. We need to see if any of these exist anywhere. We need to put the word out and let people know that these local editions do exist, so people can take advantage of them, because they're wonderful. I say, and right now we really only have the one for sure, and that's the one that's that ProQuest is digitized. This is something, again, that some of you may, I've been around so long, a lot of you guys know me, and you might have heard me talk about the Carnegie Hero. I talked about, I had a Carnegie Hero project, and so I always talked about, I got interested in this, African Americans that received the Carnegie Hero medal. I won't go into a whole lot about it, but you can look it up. But it's amazing how many African Americans were awarded a Carnegie Hero medal. There were several hundred of them from when the medal was started in the early 1900s until I stopped counting them around 1964, 65, when they stopped designating them by race. So I couldn't really distinguish as well anymore. And so, but it's really these, if you haven't seen these, they're amazing. The people and what they did. The second snapshot here, I put this one in just because you can see, look at that one. What do we have? We have two 16-year-olds and a woman that received Carnegie medals, and that's not uncommon. Like I said, you're looking at these three, and there were many others that were young people, 16 years of age or younger, many women that make up the ranks of those couple hundred people that I found that were receiving the Carnegie medal. So just absolutely amazing. When we hear people talking about, you know, our race in the past, and how we really, you know, were not quite up to the task, and it couldn't have been further from the truth. Here's one, again, I just marvel at our inventiveness. Years ago, I ran into a gentleman, and I actually bought his book. And somebody can put it in the chat or whatever and share it with other people. But there's somebody that wrote a book on inventors, pretty thick book. Again, maybe a decade or more ago, which was wonderful. But this is really, I mean, we as a people, I mean, we took care of business. And so this was really neat, again, to see. I'm just telling you right now, you get this Negro Yearbook in your hand, you know, your housework or whatever else you're doing probably going to fall by the wayside, because there's so much interesting stuff in there. And just these two entries here, I mean, talking about these guys and what they invented, their genius is just mind-boggling. And it's just a tip of the iceberg. And it's just a couple examples of hundreds, thousands of African Americans that made an impact on this in America. And again, things that aren't necessarily talked about, are they? So now we're going to move on to the magazine called Opportunity, the Journal of Negro Life. And this is a magazine that was published by the Urban League. If you don't know anything about the Urban League, you need to correct that. Okay, you need to pay attention to the Urban League, especially if your people moved up north or moved to the big cities of the South. They played such a major role in the migration for settling African Americans in the cities, handling a lot of the interaction with the companies that were looking to hire African American labor and that kind of stuff. And they still vibrant today. They're still operating and doing really, really good work. And so if you're researching people in Chicago and St. Louis and Minneapolis or whatever, and you're trying to find your people, or you got people there, you need to see if they're in the records of the Urban League. Okay, you really need to do that. So again, their magazine is full of great information. Another thing that you need to have on your radar is the YMCAs. When I saw this picture, oh my goodness, what a wonderful picture of the activity going on at the Cincinnati Y. And this is the kind of stuff, again, you'll see in the Opportunity magazine because it tied into their mission as far as housing people, getting them jobs, teaching them skills, and that kind of stuff. And so YMCAs were an integral part of the African American experience at the turn of the century, even though they were segregated. And there's a couple really nice books. If my buddy Eli Kirshner's in the audience, he might put in the chat the book on the YMCA that was written by Nina, and I'm not going to try to even try her last name. We always laugh about her last name because it's kind of complicated to pronounce. But this is another topic that we, if you're doing African American research, if you're assisting people doing African American research, you need to pay attention to these things. I was just doing research the other day, and I found a gentleman, and he was my guy, but he threw me off a little bit because when I found him, and I'm saying that's got to be the guy. The age was fitting and other things were fitting, but he was at a Y. He was on a list of people that were at a YMCA when he got enumerated. But I was able to, through my detective skills and whatever, figure it out and see it wasn't much of a stretch to me because I understood how the Y operated and how it functioned and how African Americans used it. So when I saw him there and was putting the pieces together, I was like, yeah, that's him, because it did make sense to me, where it might not have made sense to you if you're not real familiar with how the Ys operated in African American communities. And so I'm going to read these. This is an excellent example of an article that you're going to find. Here it says the Negro in Chicago industries. You might find 1 year or 1 month, in the Seattle industries, in the Dallas industry. You're just going to find all of these really neat articles, and you just got to go through and find them. And a lot of this stuff is now becoming, they're digitized, so you can search and look for these particular things by searching on Chicago and that type of stuff. But anyway, this kind of gives you an idea of how the Urban League operated, and what their function was. And so I'm going to read these. These are excerpts. I got 4 excerpts I want to read. And so the first one says the Chicago Urban League may speak perhaps with some degree of authority on these questions because its industrial department is the largest placement agency of colored workers in the city. Okay, and see, that's why I'm trying to make my point with you, is that there's lots of Urban League records that are extant, and those records may have captured your ancestors coming north and interacting with the Urban League and getting placed in a job, things like that, or being, helping them find housing and things like that. I've seen records like this at Temple University. They have a wonderful collection for Philadelphia. And so you need to look for these types of records, put it on your radar and look. And so the second thing here, it says it investigates it investigates complaints of the working people and seeks opportunities in industry not previously open to colored people. So these people, their mission is to help grease the skid, so to speak. If there's problems, they try to work through the problems to keep African Americans employed and try to get them into jobs that were close to them previous to that. They were always trying to work for the betterment of African American workers. And so here's 2 more. The Garment Workers Union accept colored women without discrimination and have even made feeble attempts to unionize them. Most of the interracial workshops are union. Colored women are generally non-union. So again, it gives you an insight if you find that your ancestor was in the garment industry. You get some information, some contemporary information about them. And then here, today, the gray iron industry, insofar as molding is concerned, is primarily all in the hands of colored men. Foundry after foundry has introduced the colored molder. And when the white molder objects and leaves, the colored man gets control and keeps it. Colored foremen over men of their own race are not uncommon. So again, as you're trying to research your ancestors in these urban places, these are types of things that if you find on the census, right, that they were a molder or whatever their occupation was, again, then you want to try to find out more information about that and their environment. What were they facing? What these types of things, and these questions can get answered by these magazines, by these journals. And again, over and over again, you're going to find just amazing, striking pictures that, to me, they take my breath away. In the one on the left, in the print, they were saying that there were over 600 women that were working for that particular company. Again, it's a Chicago company, and so if you guys got Chicago ancestors, and maybe you might have worked there. And then on the right, again, I thought it was just an amazing picture of a group of women working at a mattress manufacturing plant in Chicago. So here's another article that I found, and it was on the Negro Collegiate organization. And so the gentleman wrote an article about fraternities and sororities and what was kind of going on with them and whatnot. And so there was an accompanied picture at the end of the article, this wonderful panoramic picture showing the delegates to the convention of the A fraternity in St. Louis. And you can kind of see in the background, there's a YMCA. And that's most likely the African American YMCA down there in St. Louis. And if we got St. Louis people on the line here, you know, in the audience, they can confirm that if that's the case. And then this is a great area of exploration. It's kind of what, when you see it, it's aptly titled. It's the Bulletin Board. And so it's a bulletin board. So all this different information that's sent in on the wires or whatever to Opportunity, they're putting it in this bulletin board area. And so you're going to get a hodgepodge of really interesting information here. You never know, like what is it, Forrest Gump with chocolates, you never know what you're going to get. And you never know what you're going to get on the bulletin board. It's really fun, interesting reading when you bother to take a look. And so we're going to take a look. And so we're going to look here at an entry, and it had to do with Knoxville, Tennessee. And says the Negroes of Knoxville, Tennessee, through their ministers, adopted resolutions declining to hear Reverend Mr. Billy Sunday at the proposed meeting held primarily and exclusively for Negroes. I guess they found out, their spies found out, that this dude was chummy with the Klan. And so they were having none of it. And so they got their ministers together and they said, it ain't happening. You know, Knoxville, you representing. And so it's so funny down at the end. Then, you know, their publicists quickly, you know, got out there and said, oh, no, you know, that's not true. And here's the groups that he really, you know, fraternizes with or whatever. It's like, yeah, don't be messing with them black folks in Knoxville, Tennessee. And then here's the second one. Again, like I say, our people, the African Americans, they did not mess around. Like I say, we talk about Rosa Parks and whatever, and it's wonderful. But we know over and over, and we have these discussions, that African Americans left and right, most of them unknown, they was not having it. They were protesting. They were taking their life into their hands, like this guy, Robert Williams. You know, he's a soldier. He done got wounded 4 times over there in France, and he was not having the fact that these people were messing with him. So he filed suit on them because he was coming home from a VA place, and they basically, you know, he had the transportation order from the government, which meant, you know, hey, you're supposed to get a Pullman berth, and they wouldn't give it to him in Missouri, and he was ticked. And so as a result of that, as you can see, I say he suffered because of that. And so that brother said, I'll see y'all in court. So he's taking him to court. So I wish if there's a Judy Russell on the call here, or I hope somebody researches this to find out what happened if the man got some money for what they did to him. Great. So now we're going to step into the Colored American magazine. I swear, if you ask me which magazine was my favorite, which of these 5 that we're talking about, it depends on the day of the week. You know, one day I'd probably say one, and then the next day I'd probably be picking something else. They're all just really, really amazing. They've got wonderful components to them, including the pictures and things. And so it's just hard to choose. And so I really, really like the Colored American magazine. Here's their company building. They're in Boston, Massachusetts. That's wonderful. Like I said, when I one of the first ones I opened up the magazines or whatever and saw a picture of their building there, and I thought that was really, really neat. Now, what you're going to find with the Colored American, they got their stuff together. Out of all of these magazines that we're going to be talking about, journal/magazines, I'm probably most impressed with their website. They have this website, which is in your handout. Online is where the action is. If you want to look at the Colored American magazine, you can go there and you can download those issues freely. It's a great website, and I hadn't been there in a while. And when I was putting this presentation, when I agreed with Kurt to put this presentation together, I went back out and I was amazed. You know, now they got these table of contents, which is great because you can scan through those, and so you can do a number of things, and they have different information to share with you. In addition to allowing you to download the various volumes. So it's great. And so in this particular volume, bring your attention to, because that's the way my attention goes when I'm looking at the table of contents, lots of times it's really, and I'm going to say this because, you know, I've been doing this for a long time as far as looking at these magazines and things, and it's just the way they wrote and the way they talked and the way they did things in at early 20th century, that a lot of times these articles, you look at something and it maybe not be exactly what you thought it was. And so again, I just prefer just to go through, I'll read a little bit of something to decide whether it's something that suits what I want, what my interests are. But I'm always looking for the pictures. And so like in this instance, I'm always scanning down, I'm like portrait, and I'm like, I want to take a look at the portraits because they're so stunning and they're so beautiful. And so in this particular instance, it was a Samuel W. Starks, and that name didn't ring a bell to me personally. So I said, okay, who is this gentleman? I want to know who he is. And let me say this too, lots of times I find in these magazines, in the way they put them together, and you'll learn as you're going through, they kind of have a little bit of a system, or you learn that they do these kind of quirky things. But sometimes they'll have a photograph in the book, in the magazine journal, and then there won't be an article with it. It's just kind of a standalone thing. And then maybe several pages later, there might be a little blurb on the photograph that was, you know, 10 pages earlier or something like that. So you get some quirky, really interesting things there. But in this particular instance, for him, at least I knew what he was and kind of what he was doing, because down at the bottom there, and I'll blow it up. And so in this particular instance, there was an image that was a standalone image, but he had actually died, and so they were talking about him. But here I learned he was a librarian of the state of West Virginia. And then he was also the Supreme Chancellor of the Knights of Pythias. And I don't know a lot about the ranks and stuff, but he was at the national and up at the top of the top there. So that was pretty impressive. But I got to tell you, what got me really interested was the librarian piece. Y'all librarians out there know me. Like I said, I love going into these libraries and stuff. So to realize that this guy was the state librarian, I definitely wanted to know more about him. And so I was able to Google him and look at a few other things and find out that he was an African American community leader. He was the Supreme Chancellor of the Knights of Pythias, and that he was the first African American to serve as a state librarian. And I found out when he was appointed, which was in 1901. So it was wonderful. But here's something here that you guys need to know. I don't know, you don't know, we can't, there's pictures there's pictures out there, but we don't know if those pictures exist other places. I know when I go through these, I find a lot of pictures, and I find pictures I haven't seen before. And so I'll go on Google, you know, I'll Google the name of the person or whatever, and then click images, and I'll be looking see if I can find a copy of the picture to see if it's already out there in circulation. And I'll do that from time to time. And lots of times I don't find an image. And so I'm drawing the conclusion that lots of these images that are in here could be lost to the ages to a certain degree. And so they're kind of rare in a sense, in that you just don't find them in the mainstream, right? In this particular case, I found it, you can see it on the right on Wikipedia. I found this particular portrait, but look at the image, look at the quality of that image versus the one that I found, and that was reproduced through Colored American magazine when they digitized them. And that's the case with most of these images that you've seen so far. They really, for the most part, reproduce beautifully. So you get really nice images when you find them in here. And so, and how wonderful to find an ancestor or people in your community that have images that you discover through going through these magazines. This is one of my favorite sections of this particular magazine. It's called Here and There. And I wrote about this a long time ago when I first discovered these magazines. I think it was at University of Illinois when I came across the Colored American magazine for the first time, probably 2 decades ago now. But there was a section called Here and There, and essentially they're biographies. They're these wonderful, rich, multi-page biographies of these people. And most of these people are maybe regional people that might be known. They might be in a who's book possibly, but they're people that have achieved to a certain level. but they fly under the radar for most people. When you're researching if they're your ancestors, they may be hard to find, or you're not looking in this particular these publications for them. But you want to look at these publications for people, because these bios are amazing, and you just may not find them in other publications. And so here's an example we're going to go through. This is from November 1905. It was titled Oakland Businessmen. And so it told a story, and I'm pulling pieces out of this story here for you. And it's the story of two men that came from Austin, Texas. I don't believe they came at the same time. They both worked at various times for the Pullman Company. And I put Pullman Company and not Pullman Porter, because as I read through them, the gentleman on the right, William Vance, I believe when he was in Los Angeles, he worked for another railroad company, and he was like in their offices, I believe. But then at a different time, he was a Pullman Porter, I think, when he came up toward the Oakland area. And then Simon was a Pullman Porter most of the time when I found information on him. But they were very frugal. That was what they were talking about, how they were very industrious. They weren't wasting their money like other porters or other people. They understood the value of a dollar, and they were saving up, and they eventually were able to invest with their own finances into a small food establishment. And when they first opened the doors, they got a grand total of 4 people that they served meals when they opened. And by the time this came out, 3.5 years later, they were serving 300 to 400 people daily in 1905, which is pretty amazing. But the story gets better. The story gets better because I found more information on the restaurant. And so I was on Google Books. I put Dietrich's name in there, and this book popped up. I could only get limited views of it, but I got a pretty good heap and helping of the hospitality, as they say, on the Beverly Hillbillies. And so I was able to preview the book with a limited preview, and I was able to glean additional information. So here's part of what they had there, and then again I transcribed some of the things that were in there, some of the highlights. They talked about them remodeling and enlarging after the San Francisco earthquake. So again, they were over in Oakland, so they definitely felt the San Francisco earthquake. And so they took that time to remodel and enlarge. Their dining room, once they did those things, it seated 60. And then they had 12 private rooms that seated a total of 54 people. So they were rocking and rolling. They had electric chandeliers and fans. And now they were serving 1,000 meals a day. These guys were cranking them out day and night. They were nonstop. They were 24-hour a day operation the way I was reading this. And so they operated a day and a night shift with a wait staff of 20 people. And then they also delineated the other people that they were hiring, that were the cooks and the prep people and blah, 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 and whatever. They had quite the operation going. And then I found this advertisement in Oakland City Directory from 1908. The name of their cafe was the West End Cafe. And then you can see the gentleman there listed. But then again, I say they paid for this better advertisement, or this more significant ad in the city directory. And you can see they talk about fish, game, fruits in season, fine wines and cigars, and whatnot. So they were very instrumental and well, pioneers, according to the gentleman that wrote this book, that they made their mark on community there. And so this just kept getting better and better as I was putting the presentation together, and I'm putting stuff in Google and seeing what comes out. I find images from the online archives in California of the storefront. So here you can see actually what it looks like up close. And then in the same cache of information, I found a second one. Wow. And so how beautiful. And so you can kind of envision now, if they had these 12 rooms and all that kind of stuff, that's a lot of space. And so you can see here how this matches up with what the author of the book was describing as far as their operations. So really, really cool. I did find on Ancestry, I believe it was a death certificate for Simon Dedrick. And it then gave that information, some of the stuff that I'd already shared, his association with his many years working with the Pullman as a Pullman porter and with the association. And so you can see that there. He was single when he started the business with Vance, but later on, as I was looking through his census records, he did indeed get married. You can see that there. And so, again, wonderful pictures. And you just wish that the descendants can get a chance, if they don't have these pictures, can actually see them. And now, as Paul Harvey says, here's the rest of the story. What I ended up doing was, because I just knew Kurt just deserved a absolute top-notch fine presentation, so I just kept going out all hog. I mean, I just went all out. And so I'm looking and probing and saying, okay, let me see if I can find some descendants and reach out to them. And so I did find a family tree. And so I did reach out to a couple individuals, told them that I had found this really nice biography on somebody that I believe was their ancestor, and if they were interested, I messaged them to get back with me. Both gentlemen got back to me. The one I communicated with a couple times, the other one a few more times, and then I gave him my email. I said, hey, if you want this, here's my email. If you want to correspond, I got any more questions. Because I don't spend a lot of time in ancestry messages and whatever. And so it was about 4 or 5 days, and then I hear back from him. And he says, yes, he said, I'm interested. I'd like to see it. And so I sent it to him. And that was, I think, yesterday, maybe the day before yesterday. I sent it to him, said, good luck, on your research, and I'm glad I could help you out. And so then today, you hear me? Today, I get a message, or I get an email, because he's emailing me now. I get an email from this guy. And so here's the email. Just 12 hours old. He said, this is truly a gem that you discovered, because I often wondered whatever became of Simon A. Dedrick and what he looked like. I have the original companion portrait of his brother, W.T. Dedrick. The surname Dedrick has died off in Austin, Texas, because apparently there were no male children from him on his brother, William T. Dedrick, who is/was my great grandfather. Thank you so much. I tell you, this is the kind of stuff I really live for. I enjoy doing this research, but I really enjoy trying to bring families back together, helping people discover their families and that kind of stuff. And so this made this whole putting together this presentation worthwhile. Was this last minute email from this gentleman. It was very, very cool. And I'm gonna drink some wine when this presentation's over in celebration. You guys know that I drink some wine. Okay, so now we're on to Voice of the Negro. The Voice of the Negro is a really, really good publication also. And I gotta give these brothers, I think they're probably number one, because all of these guys are fighting for subscribers, right? They're fighting for these dollars. And so they got to get out there and they're trying to get subscribers. And so I just love this approach from The Voice. And this guy's, so they should have gave this person a raise, whoever wrote this. So, are you a subscriber to The Voice? You ought to be. It is the only magazine published in the South for colored people. It affords matter readable to all, and to which all should read. It will keep you posted on events of the day. Only $1 per year. And I was like, y'all, boy, if I was backed out, I've had to give up my dollar for these guys, because that was really, he made a good point, but he was going about it. I said, you go, brother or sister. And so as I'm looking through this one, you guys know too, if you're looking through these different newspapers and whatever, you see all these different ads, like in the city directories and different things too. So of course you got all these ads in these publications to make money. And so you see the different things, and if you're smart, you pay attention to them, especially if you're doing research, you see something that applies to your areas of research or whatnot. But I always wonder, kind of more below the surface, who advertises in these publications? Because none of my ancestors did. But I always wondered what type of person did that. Of course, they had to have the financial means and stuff. But finding them is not really all that easy. I've tried to find people when I got lots of information, like you see on some of these, and they just don't show up in Ancestry or these Family Search or whatever. I'm like, why are they not showing up? I know their address, I know whatever, and I'm just not willing to invest a whole lot of time, right, to do some real deep research to find them. I'm just trying to do the pass through, because they're not my people, and I'm not necessarily, if I'm not doing it for a higher purpose. But anyway, it's just a curiosity. It's a curiosity thing for me. So I decided, okay, I'm going to look at this one, this Hotel Maceo. I'm going to see what I can find, at least give it a shot, since it was in the Voice of the Negro. And so I actually did find the guy. And so that was neat. I was excited. Everything matched as far as the address, the 2013 on 53rd Street. But I was a little confused. Again, I'm certain things I'm not well versed in. It says Hotel Maceo. I'm wondering, is it a hotel or is it a restaurant? Because you see there, he's the proprietor of a restaurant. It's got to be him. But it says restaurant versus hotel. So it's restaurants inside of hotels. I know that. But anyway, it was something that kind of threw me off a little bit. But there's no doubt that this is the person. And that he's got his wife as a cashier. So he got to safeguard that money. And so this is him about 30 some years later, I think, from there, when he's deceased. And I found out he was really, so who advertises with people like this guy, who's quite the businessman. And so his obituary was massive. And they're talking about him. And so down in the lower left-hand side, you can see they mentioned, so again, I know I got the right guy. They mentioned that one of his first business ventures was the Hotel Maceo there. And then it proceeds to talk about the other businesses that this gentleman went into. And then off to the right, one of the big things he did, the timing was right. He operated a driving school. And so he sold and repaired automobiles and did all manner of things. But then he went into real estate, I think, after that or whatever. So the man was quite the businessman. Is a pretty amazing person. And so it was really neat being able to find out this information on this particular guy. Here's another image. Again, these images are beautiful. This image, I had to put it in here. I found it years ago when I was doing this work, probably let's say 15, 20 years ago. And I thought it was just so beautiful. Aesthetically, looking at that thing, I'm like, oh my gosh, what a great one. And then for me, I knew what Buxton, Iowa meant to African Americans as far as, because of the coal mining connection. And so I was well aware of Buxton. I had been to Buxton. So, and I have that book off to the right. And so my curiosity now is I'm kind of wondering, okay, is this image in the book or is it in some of the other Buxton collections? And so at some point in time, like I said, I'm so busy, I got so many things to do, but I really would like to try to find out if this image is in the general circulation somewhere. And I'll probably start reaching out to some of my Iowa friends at some point when I can spare some time to do that. Another beautiful picture. This one here is, to me, I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, this magazine somebody must have read that thing, are you a subscriber or whatever, and they hooked the 10th Cavalry, because the 10th Cavalry seemed to be the magazine of choice for them. And so I found this stunning picture of the troop, Troop K of the 10th Cavalry here. They're stationed at this point at Fort Robinson, Nebraska. And so, and then if you look down in that fine print, they have all presented their wives and sweethearts with 1-year subscriptions of our magazine. No roses, dear. We give you a subscription to the Voice of the Negro. Love you. And then this was below it, of course, wonderful. So you got all the names all spelled out there. And so this is a treasure. It's really a wonderful picture for people to have, particularly if you had ancestors that served in the 10th Cavalry at this particular time. And so again, like I say, this was something that was in the Voice of the Negro 1 month. And then as I was looking through the next month, I find another one. And this one they're talking about, now this is a big, nice article, and they're talking about Thanksgiving Day in the 10th Cavalry. And so they write this article, they're talking about everybody. And what they're talking about here, as you can follow through on the far left, they've got Troop K and Group and B. They're going head to head in the football matchup. So they're playing football. And so they're giving a blow by blow and talking about this. And if you go down the page, probably about 3/4 of the way down, it says the feature of the game was a spectacular playing of Private Leon Joseph, left end of the K Troop 11. He saved the team from being beaten several times with his timely tackles when the score by the B Troop seemed evident. And so again, they give it the blow by blow of what was happening. That was really cool. And so of course, I'm going through, I read the article, And then at the end of the article, as I go to the next page, I'm like, oh my goodness, look at this picture. So it's a spectacular picture of the football team of Troop K, 10th Cavalry, all there, the 11 with the people that were the officials of the football competition. So I'm like, oh my gosh, how cool. And so then again, like say Leon Joseph caught my attention. I'm like, that name's fairly, let me put that in and see what I can get. And I did find him a couple different times, which was cool. But here he is a couple years later, and he's in the Philippines. He's in the Philippine Islands. And you can see he's actually on report as far as a casualty. He's sick. And so you can see him there, and you can see his rank. And then you can see he is in the 10th Cavalry Troop K. So he's still there. So this is our last magazine. Last but not least, I love The Crisis. The Crisis is a magazine of the NAACP, and I'm going to give you the same. I'm going to say the same thing here as I did with Opportunity. Again, the NAACP, the Urban League, those were operations that many of our ancestors were intimately involved in. They were members, they were active, they were doing things, and there's extant records, there's federal records, there's all kinds of stuff out there. In the federal system, when the NAACP is suing, or when they're doing stuff, or when they're having legal actions, or when people are writing complaint letters to the Department of Labor or whatever, your people are in that. And so when you discover, so again, when you look and see if your people were members of these organizations, then that will then give you reason to start seeking out these records for the chapters in the newspapers and in these other resources. There's lots of resources out there then to try to chart or find information about your ancestors in or their activities in the NAACP. Trust me, there's stuff out there. It's really neat. But this really was a haunting image cover. I just couldn't, when I first saw it, I'm like, and I finally, my eyes adjusted to the sign back there of auction for the sale of slaves, and this woman holding her child. And this issue was like, holy smokes. It just, again, it gave me pause. And these are the kind of breathtaking, stunning type images that we're seeing in these publications. I love every time I see pictures of these African American fraternal orders, these societies, because these groups, again, they were so tightly integrated and woven into these African American communities. And I think nearly all of us in the audience at some point in time have probably found that they have an ancestor that was connected. I know for the longest time, I didn't have one. I didn't think I did, but then I actually, at one point after my mom passed, I actually did find the papers of my great-grandfather, his papers showing that he was a member of the OddFellows. And that was really, really neat. And so it gave me an avenue and a reason to start researching them. So that's a great picture. This was one of those things I was going to do a nice, really drawn out example here of this. Out of all the things I've seen, this really took my breath away. Let me say this. If you have New Orleans people in this time period, or you know people that do, share this information, share this with them. They need to see this. This is absolutely, I just couldn't believe the things that I was seeing in this particular issue. And I wonder if they do this periodically for other, cities and things like that. I would think they probably do. And I'm very interested to find out. But this particular one, they had amazing pictures and content on the city of New Orleans, which I didn't have time to share them. It's just too much stuff. But I definitely wanted to leave this slide in and make you aware of the things. One of the pictures, if you see, I think let's see if it's in there. Wonderful picture of the public library, New Orleans University. Oh, there it is, the Grand Army of the Republic, right? Civil War veterans. Oh my gosh, they have a picture of maybe like 6 or 8 Civil War veterans that were the leaders of the Grand Army post down there. Wonderful pictures. And again, did those pictures survive? Are they somewhere else? There's and likelihood they probably not. And so I was just stunned when I went to the next page and saw them. But Colored Creoles of Louisiana, just a whole bunch of stuff. So please pass this along to people that you know have research in that particular area. Okay, so the crisis has a section called the horizon, And this section kind of reports out on a number of topics. You can see their politics, riots, and they're pretty consistent. You know, they have the ones they might appear every month, or they might drop off a month and come back or whatever. But they've got this range of topics that they kind of stick to that are very interesting. And so one of them is crime. And so when I got to the one for crime and started looking at it, you know, what I realized that they were reporting on crime, but not in the way we generally think and see when we look at newspapers, mainstream newspapers, regular newspapers. It's not that way. The news flashes were outrages against Black folk. So they were reporting crimes against Black people. Hey, this is what they're doing to us. And they're reporting that stuff. And so it was stunning. And so here's an example of that I pulled out of there at Altenheimer, Arkansas, if I pronounced that right, forgive me if I didn't. But September 21st, Dr. Hardin, a white planter, shot and killed James Ellis, a colored farmer, because Ellis had the audacity to gin his cotton with another man so as to keep Hardin from robbing him. And you know that's the truth. You know that's the truth, because it's just been repeated over and over in the South, where with the Southern way, you know, of them trying to rob Black people. And it was easier in the beginning when they were illiterate and they weren't quite sure how to count their money or whatever. And they were saying, oh, you know, let me count it out for you, Jim, or whatever. But Black people quickly got literate and figured stuff out. But even then, right, because of this, the suppression, because of the oppression, because of the things that were going on in the South, lots of times they were being robbed and they couldn't say anything about it. You know, and it's a terrible situation for them. And so this gentleman probably, you know, he didn't want to have a confrontation with the man when he knew the man was robbing him. So he just went, hey, I'll just go to somebody else that's innocent enough. Man came back and shot him. What a mess. I was furious when I read this one, but I see just in the only time, right? Just absolutely crazy. This is the kind of history we got to teach. They don't want us to be teaching it in the schools. All right. And so now we're going to end with a mystery, okay? Mystery theater here. So this is the Bienville Democrat, Arcadia, Bienville Parish. And so what we're going to do with this mystery, we'll say, okay, who is Pierce Dance? And so as we look through the article, we find, we learn the facts that there's a Tom Wafer, about 35 years old, Black farmer. He's living on F.P. Dance's place, and he was killed, or he died from knife wounds inflicted by a guy by the name of Knight Atkins, another Black person who is a tenant on Pierce Dance's farm. And so they talk about where the encounter took place. They talked about, you know, the pocket knife and where they stabbed him. He got medical attention, but he still died from loss of blood. And then, of course, they say that, you know, well, rumor has it that, you know, it was a woman, and that was the reason for the altercation and the eventual death of this gentleman. So this is the typical stuff that we see, right? We see this stuff in those Southern papers all the time. They're quick to report this type of stuff. And so this is not unusual. But Pierce is what catches our attention as African American researchers, or people that research African American, as we look at this, is the fact that this gentleman is connected to Black folks through his farm tenancy, right? Because you looked at, as you pull that out of there, you see that he was a tenant on Pierce's farm. So we know that he engages in that type of activity. So that's the mystery. Okay, so let's find, who is this guy? How did he operate? Because again, if this was our particular person, we would want to research this gentleman and try to see what kind of records, right, that existed, agricultural records or whatever that existed on Pierce Dance. So let's do a little bit of a research journey looking for him. So I found some things. I started looking. So here we are. We got his draft card, so we're learning a little bit more about him. We got his RFD number 3 in Arcadia. We now got a birth date for him. We know when he was born. We know he was native born. We knew he was a farmer already. It confirms that. And now we get his mother's name too, Fanny. And then we see his signature. So then I start going and I start looking at his census records. And so here he is. He's D.W. Dance, but this is him. We see Frank P. dance. So that matches up with FP. So we know that was the other person who was in that altercation. It was on this particular gentleman's farm. And so we know it was father and son properties there. And he was listed as a farmer on his own own account. So now here's the 1920 and 30 censuses. And so here's here on the right, 1920, we see him again. He's 38 years old. He's still farming on his own account. And then in 1930, occupations listed as none. Well, that's kind of a head scratcher. You're thinking, okay, they've got this property. What happened? Did he lose the property? What's going on? His father had a lot of property. So, you know, you think he still should be farming. His father's pretty old. He probably shouldn't be farming anymore. So that kind of was a head scratcher for me. I'm like, what's up with this dude? You know, what's he about? That seemed like a little bit of a flag for me that I was doing like my lifelong friend. I'm saying he's my forever friend, J. Mark Lowe would say, you know, he's like, mull and ponder that. What's going on there? Something seems interesting. I had to mull and ponder it. So anyway, so we move on to, hey, now he did. Okay, now we got Pierce W. Dance. We find that he is deceased. He died on February 5th, 1933. Didn't find any obit on him, but we know that this gentleman is now dead, okay, as of 1933. But before he died, he was in the crime statistic. Here he is. In Arcadia, Louisiana, John Lewis and his aged mother, colored, were shot to death and several white and colored people wounded as a result of a white man, Pierce Dance, trying to settle a quarrel with a Negro by means of a pistol. Now, I'm kind of leaving you guys with this. What do you think? Was this in the Bienville Democrat? Okay, that's a question that needs to be explored. But my money's on that is not. They ain't gonna be talking about that. Okay, so hey, thank you guys so much for taking the time. I did pretty good. Usually I say I'm a few minutes over, but I'll blame that on Kurt and them for taking up my time up front. I'm joking, Kurt. Okay, let me stop sharing and stop laughing. I love to laugh. You guys know that. Oh gosh.